Is the United States a medication nation? Are we focused on depression? Have we noticed rise in depression and suicide in the United States? Well, yes, unfortunately we have. We have a lot of trouble with that. And to answer some of these questions that we have today, we should go back into the past, deep into the past, and to learn from King Solomon, who is known as one of the wisest kings of all time. King Solomon was the wealthiest and most powerful king to have lived in ancient times. He had hundreds of wives, and all of his material desires were fulfilled. His wives led him astray from God, and he began worshiping pagan gods. He also had more wisdom than anyone else, and his wisdom shone through when he cried out in agony in Ecclesiastes towards the end of his life, after reflecting on the mistakes that he had made. In Ecclesiastes 2, 1-3, I said to myself, "Come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good." But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. In Ecclesiastes 2, 12-16, he continued, Then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom and also madness and folly. What more can the king's successor do than what has already been done? I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The wise have eyes in their heads, while the fool walks in the darkness. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. Then I said to myself, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? I said to myself, this too is meaningless. For the wise, like the fool, will not long be remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die. Just remember, unless you're famous 3 generations from now, it's highly likely you'll be forgotten. This might lead to depression. What is depression? The National Institute of Mental Health defines depression as a common but serious mood disorder. It causes severe symptoms that affect how you feel, think, and handle daily activities, such as sleeping, eating, or working. Symptoms include persistent sad, anxious, or empty mood, feelings of hopelessness or pessimism, irritability, feelings of guilt, worthlessness, or helplessness, loss of interest or pleasure in hobbies and activities, and decreased energy or fatigue. What helps relieve symptoms? According to the NIMH, medicine, psychotherapy, or a combination of both tend to be useful. Yet antidepressants take 2 to 4 weeks to offer relief, and according to the NIMH, in some cases, children, teenagers, and young adults under 25 may experience an increase in suicidal thoughts or behavior when taking antidepressants, especially in the first few weeks after starting or when the dose has changed. Risk factors include personal or family history of depression, major life changes, trauma or stress, and certain physical illnesses and medications. So what can solve these problems? Is there anything outside of medicine, psychotherapy, or those combinations? Is there anything else that we can turn to? Is there another source of hope? Can atheism pull someone out of depression? Is that possible? Atheism is either rejecting God's existence or lacking the belief in God, depending on how the atheist defines himself or herself. Some people become atheists following a very traumatic event based on emotional reasoning. This video isn't about those who've recently suffered trauma and are turning away from God. Time may help to heal their wounds and restore their faith in God. This video is focusing more on those who become lifelong atheists. People I've encountered on Twitter in many cases seem to be of these types. Over the long term, atheism has a 30% retention rate, which is the lowest of any religion, which is something that actually gives many of us hope who are trying to convince the atheism that yes, indeed, there is God. Solomon continued in Ecclesiastes 2, 10-11. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. But by the time he wrote Ecclesiastes 12, he realized the following. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come, and the years approach, when you will say, I find no pleasure in them, before the sun and the light, and the moon and the stars grow dark. So where do we get hope? We want answers to life's deepest questions. This helps to bring us hope. When we know the answers and we seek meaning, we tend to find much more sense of hope. Why are we here? This speaks to our purpose and meaning. How did we get here? It speaks to our origins. Is there more to this life? It speaks to our destiny. Do we have an eternal life? Why do I have a conscience that fills me with a desire to do right and guilt when I've done wrong? This speaks to our morality. Where can all of these questions be answered? Is there a single answer for all of these very difficult, meaningful, deep questions of life? And if we find that answer, will we find the hope we need to help us with our depression, if we're depressed? Well, who has the answers? Who is worthy? Jesus. He said, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." He said this in Matthew 11:29. Also, another famous quote. It's called "Footprints in the Sand." "So I said to the Lord, you promised me, Lord, that if I followed you, you would walk with me always. But I noticed that during the most trying points in my life, there have only been one set of prints in the sand. Why? When I have needed you the most, you have not been there for me." The Lord replied, "The times when you have seen only one set of footprints is when I carried you." As Denzel Washington said, "You will never find a U-Haul behind a hearse." In other words, we can't take it with us. So we have to make sure that what we do now builds our spirits, not our material banks. This life seems meaningless if defined within the boundaries of this physical earth. There's not enough money in the world to make you happy. Solomon had all the money in the world, and Solomon was still very unhappy, trying to chase the wind. He realized that money doesn't mean anything. Spirituality means everything. And if we want to connect with our spirits, we want to connect with the deepest spirit that we possibly can, who can answer all of the biggest questions in life. And that is Christianity, Jesus Christ. When we define within the boundaries of the physical earth, again, life is meaningless. Yet when defined in the eternal life, life's meaning becomes much more clear. Everything you do in this life is important, as your interactions with family, friends, and others may have a ripple effect on future generations. In the spiritual sense, we are all made in the image of God. This cannot be accentuated enough. If you go back to the book of Genesis, you're going to notice that God said, "We are all made in his image." This means that all humans have value. This is something that goes in contrast to what many different civilizations have felt in societies. Many did not value all humans. In fact, slaves were deemed not human. People in the Jewish war during World War II were considered not human. Babies in ancient times oftentimes were left out into the streets because they couldn't be paid for, they couldn't be afforded, so people just left them out to exposure and they died that way. They were not considered human. Today, the abortion battle rages on, where fetuses inside of adults are considered not human quite yet. Yet all humans are of value and can make a difference that will define our destiny. Forget your past and focus on the future. You have the potential to make a tremendous impact on this others and world. So how should someone start? What do you enjoy? What are your spiritual gifts? What would you advise someone in your shoes to do to make life better? Follow the advice you would give to one of your loved ones. That is the advice that is the most valuable. I want to say thank you for your time. I really appreciate that you came by. Please like, subscribe, and do come again. This is S.J. Thomason with Christian-Apologist.com. Bye-bye.